Tonight, you're about to discover ancient wisdom that has guided seekers to inner peace for over 2,000 years. I'm going to share a selection of profound Zen stories that reveal the deepest secrets of mental freedom and emotional liberation. Each tale contains a transformative teaching that can shift your entire relationship with stress, anger, and the endless pursuit of more. These aren't ordinary bedtime stories. They're carefully preserved teachings from enlightened masters who understood something most of us have forgotten, that peace isn't found in changing our circumstances, but in changing our relationship to them. The Buddha once said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." In the next hour, you'll discover exactly how this ancient truth can transform your modern life. As we journey through tales of fierce samurai learning humility, disciples discovering wisdom in unexpected places, and farmers who lose everything only to gain freedom, you'll notice something remarkable happening. The tight grip of worry will begin to loosen. The constant chatter of your thoughts will start to quiet. You'll find yourself naturally settling into a state of profound understanding and rest. These stories have been whispered in monasteries, shared around meditation halls, and passed down through generations of seekers. Each one is a key that unlocks a different door in the mansion of your consciousness. Some doors lead to rooms where anger loses its power. Others open to spaces where the need to accumulate dissolves. Still others reveal chambers where simple presence becomes the greatest teacher. So settle in deeply now. Let your body sink into whatever supports you. Take one conscious breath with me, and as you exhale, know that you're about to receive teachings that have been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Let's begin. Our first story takes place in ancient Japan, where the morning mist clings to temple roofs and the sound of temple bells drifts through bamboo groves. This is the story of the samurai and the Zen master. In those days, a proud and brash samurai warrior lived for honor above all else. His reputation preceded him wherever he went, and his skill with the sword was matched only by his fierce temper. One day, burning with curiosity about spiritual matters, he sought out a renowned Zen master who was known throughout the land for his wisdom. The master sat in deep meditation beneath an ancient pine tree, his breathing so quiet it barely disturbed the morning air. The samurai approached with heavy footsteps, his armor clanking, his impatience growing with each moment the master remained silent. "Tell me the nature of heaven and hell," the samurai demanded, his voice cutting through the peaceful silence like a blade. The Zen master slowly opened one eye, looked directly into the samurai's face, and replied with sudden, cutting scorn, "Why should I answer to a shabby, disgusting, despondent slob like you? A worm like you? Do you think I should tell you anything? I can't stand you. Get out of my sight. I have no time for silly questions." The samurai's face flushed red with rage. How dare this monk insult a warrior of his standing? His hand flew to his sword, and in one fluid motion, he drew the blade and raised it high above the master's head, ready to strike down this insolent teacher. The Zen master looked straight into the samurai's blazing eyes and spoke with infinite tenderness. "That is hell." In that moment, the samurai froze completely. Understanding flooded through him like dawn breaking over mountains. He saw with crystal clarity that his anger had completely consumed him, transforming him into something he barely recognized. His mind had created its own hell, a realm filled with resentment, hatred, murderous rage, and the complete loss of his noble spirit. He realized he had been so deep in his torment that he was ready to kill an innocent teacher. Tears filled the warrior's eyes as the truth of his condition became undeniable. Slowly, reverently, he set his sword aside, pressed his palms together, and bowed deeply in gratitude for this profound teaching. The Zen master smiled with the gentleness of a father, welcoming home a lost child, and whispered, "And that is heaven." The Buddha taught, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This profound truth reveals itself in the samurai's transformation from hell to heaven in a single moment of awakening. Why do we create our own hells so readily? Zen Buddhism points to what it calls the three poisons that cloud our natural wisdom: greed, hatred, and delusion. In this story, we see hatred in its raw form, not just as an emotion, but as a complete state of being that transforms paradise into torment. The samurai's hell wasn't a place he would go after death. It was the burning reality he created in his own mind and body in that very moment. His face flushed with rage, his heart pounding with fury, his entire being consumed by the desire to destroy. This was hell made manifest in human experience. Consider how often throughout your day you create similar states of torment. Perhaps someone cuts you off in traffic, and suddenly your peaceful morning dissolves into a cauldron of righteous anger. Maybe a coworker fails to acknowledge your greeting, and your mind begins spinning stories of disrespect and slight. These moments reveal the same pattern. We take external circumstances and use them as raw material to construct our own private hells. The master's apparent insults were not cruel but skillful. Like a surgeon using a sharp blade to remove a tumor, he used harsh words to reveal the rage that already existed within the samurai's heart. The anger wasn't created by the insults. It was already there, waiting to be triggered. The master simply provided a mirror that reflected the warrior's inner state back to him. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This paradox captures the essence of the samurai's journey. In his moment of perfect rage, he was also perfectly positioned to see through the illusion his anger had created. The transformation from hell to heaven happened not through changing external circumstances, but through a shift in awareness. The samurai didn't need to travel anywhere or acquire anything new. Heaven was revealed when he saw clearly the hell his own mind had constructed. This is the secret that transforms suffering. Hell and heaven are not destinations, but states of consciousness. When we're caught in anger, resentment, or hatred, we inhabit hell regardless of our external circumstances. When we see through these mental constructions and return to our natural state of awareness, heaven reveals itself right where we are. In Zen practice, we learn to recognize these hellish states as soon as they arise. We develop what might be called early warning systems for our own mental and emotional storms. The tightening in the chest, the heating of the face, the accelerating heartbeat, all these become signals that we're constructing a hell that we'll have to live in. The Buddha said, "Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal." The samurai discovered this law in his own direct experience. His anger could not be resolved through violence, but was instantly dissolved through understanding. Tonight, as you notice any areas of tension or irritation in your own experience, can you observe them with the same clarity the samurai discovered? Can you see how your own thoughts and reactions create the quality of your inner world? As the Zen master showed, heaven is always available, not as a reward for good behavior, but as the natural state revealed when we stop creating hell. Now let us journey to a peaceful monastery nestled beside a flowing river, where a master and his disciples practice the art of mindful living. This is the story of the questioning disciple and his teacher's unusual guidance. In a quiet monastery nestled beside a flowing river, a Zen master lived with his devoted disciples. Each morning, they would walk together to bathe in the clear, cool waters, practicing mindfulness with each step on the worn path. The sound of water flowing over stones provided a constant reminder of impermanence and the natural flow of existence. One particular morning, after their ritual cleansing, the master emerged from the river with water droplets glistening on his robes. His disciples gathered around him as he walked, their faces eager for teaching, their notebooks ready to capture pearls of wisdom. Among them was a particularly earnest young monk who had traveled great distances to study under this revered teacher. As they walked slowly back toward the monastery, the disciple could no longer contain his burning question. "Dear Master," he said with deep reverence, "what should I do to realize Zen? I have studied texts, practiced meditation, and followed all the prescribed methods, yet enlightenment still seems so distant." The master paused in his walking and pointed to a dog lying peacefully by the riverbank, its fur still wet from an early morning drink. The animal rested in complete contentment, occasionally lifting its head to watch a butterfly or listen to bird songs, then settling back into serene presence. "Learn from that dog," the master said simply, then continued walking. The disciple felt a sharp stab of disappointment pierce his chest. After all his sincere seeking, after traveling so far and dedicating so much time to practice, was his teacher mocking him? Anger began to rise in his throat like bitter medicine. "Oh, Master," he said, struggling to keep his voice respectful, "what can I possibly learn from a dog? I have come seeking the highest wisdom, not animal behavior." The master walked on in peaceful silence, his footsteps creating a gentle rhythm on the monastery path. Birds sang in the branches above, and somewhere in the distance, temple bells marked the passing hours. But the disciple heard none of this beauty. His mind churned with frustration and wounded pride. Unable to bear the silence, he pressed on. "I don't want to learn from that dog. Please, Master, give me real spiritual instruction. Tell me something profound that will help me achieve enlightenment." The master stopped again and pointed to another dog they encountered on the road. This one was hungrily eating scraps of food left by passing travelers, its tail wagging with simple satisfaction at finding nourishment. "Then learn from this dog," the master said with the same gentle authority. Now the disciple's composure cracked completely. "You are making fun of me, Master. What can I possibly learn from a dog? All it does is eat and sleep. I have come to you precisely to become free from such basic, mindless existence." The master turned to face his student fully, his eyes holding infinite compassion mixed with gentle amusement. "You also eat and sleep," he observed quietly, then walked into his meditation hut, leaving the disciple standing frozen in the courtyard. The Buddha taught, 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. This story reveals a truth. that our sophisticated minds often struggle to accept. The wisdom we seek is already present in the simplest moments of being. Why did the disciple resist such a simple teaching? Zen Buddhism points to what might be called spiritual materialism, the ego's tendency to turn even spiritual practice into another form of acquisition and achievement. The disciple wanted something special, something that would set him apart from ordinary existence and confirm his identity as a serious seeker. The dogs in this story represent what Zen calls Buddha nature, the natural, unconditioned awareness that exists before the mind creates elaborate stories about spiritual attainment. The first dog, resting by the river, embodied perfect presence. It wasn't trying to achieve anything or become anyone special. It simply existed in complete harmony with the moment. The second dog, eating scraps, demonstrated another aspect of Buddha nature, the ability to meet life's basic needs without drama or commentary. It didn't complain about the quality of the food or worry about whether eating scraps reflected poorly on its spiritual status. It simply ate when hungry, with gratitude and attention. Consider how often we complicate our own existence with layers of spiritual or psychological concepts. We meditate, but worry we're not meditating correctly. We practice mindfulness, but judge our wandering minds. We seek enlightenment, but create suffering through our very seeking. The dogs, in their simplicity, point to a way of being that transcends these complications. The master's final observation, "You also eat and sleep," cuts through all pretense. Despite all our spiritual aspirations and sophisticated practices, we remain biological beings with simple needs. The question becomes, can we meet these basic realities with the same presence and acceptance the dogs demonstrated? Zen teacher Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self." The disciple was studying concepts about enlightenment rather than studying his actual moment-to-moment experience. The dogs, without any concept of Buddha nature, were perfectly expressing it. This doesn't mean we should abandon formal practice or intellectual understanding. Rather, it suggests that our practice should make us more natural, more present, more able to meet ordinary moments with extraordinary awareness. The dogs weren't practicing Zen, they were simply being themselves completely. The shock the disciple experienced when told he also eats and sleeps was the recognition of this simple truth. His spiritual seeking had created a false separation between ordinary activities and spiritual ones. The master's teaching dissolved this artificial boundary, revealing that every moment, eating, sleeping, walking, even feeling frustrated, offers opportunities for awakening. In Zen monasteries, work practice is considered as important as sitting meditation. Chopping vegetables, sweeping floors, and tending gardens are all forms of spiritual cultivation when approached with full attention. The dogs understood this intuitively. Every activity could be performed with complete presence and natural ease. The Buddha said, "If you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions." The dogs were neither dwelling on the past nor anxious about the future. They inhabited the eternal now with perfect simplicity. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, can you approach sleep with the natural ease the dogs demonstrated? Can you meet your basic human needs, breathing, relaxing, letting go, without turning them into complex spiritual projects? As the Master showed, the deepest wisdom often comes disguised as the most ordinary experience. Our next story reveals a profound truth about attachment and freedom through a simple encounter between the Buddha and a desperate farmer. This is the story of the farmer's cows and the Buddha's gentle teaching about true wealth. It was midday in a peaceful grove where the Buddha sat with his community of monks after sharing their simple meal together. They had eaten mindfully, in gratitude for the food that sustained their bodies and the companionship that nourished their spirits. The filtered sunlight created dancing patterns on the forest floor, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Suddenly, the tranquil atmosphere was shattered by the appearance of a farmer, his face flushed with panic and desperation. His clothes were disheveled, sweat beaded on his forehead, and his breathing came in short, anxious gasps. He rushed toward the group, his eyes darting frantically in all directions. "Monks, have you seen my cows?" he called out before he had even properly approached. "Please, I beg you, have you seen them? I don't think I can survive so much misfortune." The Buddha looked up at the agitated man with infinite compassion, recognizing the familiar signs of a mind caught in the grip of attachment and fear. "What has happened, friend?" he asked gently. The farmer's words tumbled out in a torrent of anguish. "Monks, this morning all 12 of my cows ran away. Every single one. And if that weren't enough, this year my entire crop of sesame plants was eaten by insects. Everything I worked for, everything I counted on, it's all gone. These cows were my livelihood, my security, my future. Without them, I am nothing. I have nothing left." The Buddha nodded with understanding, seeing clearly the suffering that comes from building our identity and security upon external circumstances. "Sir, we have not seen your cows," he replied calmly. "Perhaps they have gone in the other direction." The farmer bowed hastily in gratitude and rushed off down the path, still calling for his lost animals, his voice growing fainter as he disappeared into the forest. After the farmer had gone, the Buddha turned to his community of monks with eyes that sparkled with gentle humor and deep wisdom. A knowing smile played at the corners of his mouth as he looked at each of his followers, these men who had voluntarily given up worldly possessions to seek truth and inner freedom. "Dear friends," he said, his voice carrying both lightness and profound insight, "do you know you are the happiest people on earth? You have no cows or sesame plants to lose." The monks sat in contemplative silence, absorbing the deeper meaning of their teacher's words. They began to understand that what the world might see as deprivation, their simple robes, their basic meals, their lack of material possessions, was actually a form of great wealth. They were wealthy in freedom, rich in presence, abundant in peace. The Buddha continued, his teaching flowing like water, finding its natural course. We always try to accumulate more and more, believing these cows are essential for our existence. In fact, they may be the very obstacles that prevent us from being truly happy. Release your cows and become a free person. Release your cows and discover happiness that cannot be taken away. The Buddha taught, you only lose what you cling to. This profound truth reveals itself in the contrast between the farmer's panic and the monk's peace. The farmer's suffering wasn't caused by the loss of his cows, but by his attachment to them as the source of his security and identity. Why do we accumulate cows, possessions, achievements, relationships, even spiritual experiences? believing they will bring us lasting happiness. Zen Buddhism points to our fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of security and fulfillment. We look outside ourselves for stability in a world where everything is constantly changing. The farmer's 12 cows and sesame crop represent all the external things we grasp for security: our bank accounts, our job titles, our social status, our health, our relationships, even our self-image as spiritual seekers. Each of these can bring temporary satisfaction, but they all share one crucial characteristic: they can be lost. This doesn't mean we should abandon responsibility or become indifferent to practical matters. The Buddha wasn't suggesting we should all become homeless wanderers. Rather, he was pointing to the difference between using things skillfully and being used by them. The monks still ate food and wore robes, but they held these necessities lightly, without the desperate clinging that creates suffering. Consider your own cows, the things you tell yourself you couldn't live without. Perhaps it's a certain standard of living, a particular role in your family or workplace, or even your health and physical capabilities. Notice how much mental energy goes into protecting, maintaining, and worrying about these possessions. This energy, which could be available for presence, compassion, and genuine fulfillment, gets locked up in a constant cycle of acquisition and protection. The deepest teaching in this story is that happiness based on having is always vulnerable to loss, while happiness based on being is unassailable. The monks had discovered what Zen calls the treasure house, the inherent wholeness that exists prior to gaining or losing anything. Zen master Huang Po taught, "Your treasure house is in yourself. It contains all you need." The farmer was looking in the forest for cows that, even if found, would only provide temporary security. The monks had found a treasure that required no protection because it could never be stolen. This doesn't mean we stop caring for our responsibilities or become careless with resources. Rather, we begin to hold our possessions, both material and psychological, more lightly. We use them without being used by them. We enjoy them without depending on them for our fundamental well-being. The farmer's frantic search represents the endless activity of a mind that believes happiness lies in the next acquisition, the next achievement, the next external validation. The monk's peaceful sitting represents the revolutionary discovery that we already have everything we need for genuine fulfillment. In our modern context, our cows might be our career advancement, our children's success, our romantic relationship, our retirement savings, or even our meditation practice. The question isn't whether these things have value, but whether we hold them so tightly that losing them would devastate our sense of self. The Buddha said, "Health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth, faithfulness the best relationship." The monks embodied this teaching. Their contentment didn't depend on external circumstances, but arose from their deep acceptance of what is. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, can you release your grip on the cows you've been protecting? Can you discover the peace that comes from having nothing to lose because you've found everything you need in this very moment? As the Buddha taught, the end of suffering isn't found in getting what we want, but in releasing our attachment to wanting itself. In this release, we discover what the monks knew, that we are already free, already whole, already home. We just forgot this truth while we were busy chasing cows. In the misty mountains of feudal Japan, where legends of master swordsmen echo through the valleys, we discover a tale about the paradox of urgent learning. This is the story of Matajuro and the taste of his master's sword. In feudal Japan, nestled among the mist-covered peaks of Mount Futara, lived Banzo, a swordsman whose skill was legendary throughout the land. His reputation drew seekers from across the country, all hoping to learn the secret of his extraordinary mastery. Among these hopeful students came a young man named Matajuro Yagyu, carrying the weight of disappointment and desperate ambition. Matajuro was the son of a famous swordsman, yet his father had pronounced his work too mediocre for mastership and disowned him in shame. The young man's pride burned with this rejection, fueling an urgent hunger to prove his worth. He climbed the mountain path to Banzo's modest dwelling with determination blazing in his eyes. "Master Banzo," Matajuro said, bowing deeply, "I wish to learn swordsmanship under your guidance. I will do anything, endure any hardship." Banzo studied the young man carefully, seeing immediately the fever of impatience that consumed him. "You cannot fulfill the requirements," he said simply. "But if I work hard," Matajuro persisted, his voice tight with anxiety, "how many years will it take to become a master?" "The rest of your life," Banzo replied without hesitation. The answer struck Matajuro like a physical blow. "I cannot wait that long," he exclaimed. "I am willing to pass through any hardship, if only you will teach me. If I become your devoted servant, working day and night, how long might it be?" Banzo considered this for a moment. "Oh, maybe 10 years. Hope flickered in the young man's chest, but his impatience quickly consumed it. "My father is getting old, and soon I must take care of him. If I work far more intensively with complete dedication, how long would it take me?" "Oh, maybe 30 years, said Banzo calmly. Matajuro's eyes widened in confusion and frustration. "Why is that? First you say 10, and now 30 years. I will undergo any hardship to master this art in the shortest time possible." "Well," said Banzo, with the faintest smile, "in that case, you will have to remain with me for 70 years. A man in such a hurry as you are to get results seldom learns quickly." The words hung in the mountain air like temple bells, their truth gradually penetrating the young man's consciousness. Finally, understanding dawned. "Very well," declared Matajuro, his voice now quiet with new wisdom. "I agree." From that day forward, Matajuro was forbidden to speak of fencing or even touch a sword. Instead, he cooked for his master, washed dishes, made beds, cleaned the courtyard, and tended the garden. Day after day, month after month, not a single word of swordsmanship passed between them. 3 years dragged by in this seemingly mundane routine. As Matajuro swept leaves and prepared meals, sadness would sometimes wash over him. Had he devoted his life to becoming a servant rather than a swordsman? But one ordinary morning, as he knelt preparing rice, Banzo crept silently behind him and delivered a tremendous blow with a wooden sword. The young man cried out in shock and pain. The next day, while stirring soup, Banzo struck again without warning. From that moment forward, day and night, Matajuro had to remain constantly alert. Every moment became filled with the possibility of attack. He learned to sense his master's presence, to hear the whisper of approaching footsteps, to feel the subtle shift in the air that preceded a strike. Not a moment passed that he did not have to think of what he came to call the taste of Banzo's sword. That sharp awareness, that kept him perpetually present and responsive. His entire being became attuned to the subtle rhythms of danger and safety, action and stillness. Gradually, Matajuro's defensive skills grew so refined that he could sense an attack before it was even launched. His movements became fluid, effortless, perfectly timed. The smile that began to appear on Banzo's face told him everything he needed to know. In time, Matajuro became the greatest swordsman in all the land. The Buddha taught, "Drop by drop is the water pot filled." Likewise, the wise one, gathering it little by little, fills oneself with good. This story reveals the profound truth that mastery comes not through forced acceleration, but through patient cultivation of awareness. Why do we believe that urgency will speed our learning? Zen Buddhism points to what might be called achievement mind, the ego's desperate need to acquire skills, knowledge, or spiritual attainments as quickly as possible. This urgency actually becomes the primary obstacle to genuine learning because it keeps us focused on future results rather than present process. Matajuro's initial approach represents how most of us engage with learning. We want to fast-track our way to mastery, to find shortcuts that will deliver results without the slow work of fundamental development. We negotiate with reality, trying to bargain our way to competence through intensity rather than patience. Banzo's counterintuitive teaching, that greater urgency would require more time, reveals a crucial principle. The quality of our attention determines the speed of our learning far more than the quantity of our effort. Matajuro's desperate hurry created internal tension that actually blocked his capacity to absorb the subtle teachings of swordsmanship. Consider how this pattern shows up in your own life. Perhaps you're learning a musical instrument and become frustrated that you can't play complex pieces immediately. Maybe you're developing a meditation practice, but grow impatient that enlightenment hasn't arrived after a few weeks. The urgency itself becomes a form of resistance to the natural unfolding that learning requires. The 3 years of seemingly mundane tasks weren't a delay in Matajuro's education. They were the foundation of his mastery. Through cooking, cleaning, and gardening, he developed the quality of presence and attention that would later allow him to sense his master's attacks. His consciousness became refined through simple, repetitive activities performed with complete attention. When Banzo finally began the sword training, it came not through formal instruction, but through the cultivation of what Zen calls don't know mind, a state of open, alert awareness that responds spontaneously to changing circumstances. Matajuro learned to taste his master's sword, not through thinking about technique, but through developing an embodied wisdom that transcended conscious strategy. The taste of Banzo's sword represents the quality of awareness that emerges when we stop forcing outcomes and instead become completely available to what each moment requires. It's the difference between studying about balance and actually learning to walk, between reading about love and learning to open our hearts. This teaching applies to every area of development, whether we're learning to parent with wisdom, developing patience in relationships, or cultivating inner peace. The ego's urgency to get there keeps us from being here, where all real learning happens. The Buddha said, "Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded." Matajuro's initial impatience was a form of unguarded thinking that would have prevented him from ever accessing true mastery. Through Banzo's skillful guidance, he learned to transform urgency into presence, achievement focus into process focus, and forced effort into natural responsiveness. Tonight, as you notice any areas of your life where impatience pushes against natural timing, can you taste something of Banzo's wisdom? Can you discover how slowing down might actually accelerate your deepest learning? As Matajuro found, the sword we're really learning to master is the blade of our own awareness. Deep in a village where cherry blossoms mark the seasons of love and loss, unfolds a story about the wisdom of seeing through our own mental creations. This is the story of the ghost who knew everything. In a small village where cherry blossoms lined the quiet streets, a young couple lived in deep devotion to one another. Their love was the kind that seems to make the whole world brighter, each day beginning and ending with gratitude for their shared life. But as often happens in human existence, their happiness was visited by the shadow of impermanence. The young wife fell gravely ill, and despite all their prayers and the best care they could provide, it became clear that death was approaching. As her strength ebbed away, her love for her husband seemed to intensify, as if she were trying to pour a lifetime of affection into their remaining moments together. "I love you so much," she whispered to him with her last breaths, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. "I do not want to leave you. Promise me. Do not go to any other woman. If you do, I will return as a ghost and cause you endless trouble." The husband, tears streaming down his face, promised solemnly to honor her wish. Soon after, she passed away peacefully in his arms, leaving him alone in a world that suddenly felt hollow and colorless. For 3 months, the husband kept his promise faithfully. He tended her grave daily, spoke to her photograph each morning, and couldn't imagine ever loving another. But grief, while it honors love, cannot sustain life indefinitely. Slowly, despite his guilt, he began to notice the world around him again. The sound of children playing, the warmth of sunlight, the gentle kindness of neighbors who brought him meals. One day, a woman who had been bringing him food lingered to talk, and he found himself laughing for the first time since his wife's death. Their conversations grew longer and more frequent. Despite his resistance, he felt his heart beginning to open again. When they became engaged to be married, he told himself his first wife would have wanted him to find happiness. That very night, his peaceful sleep was shattered by a terrifying apparition. His deceased wife appeared at the foot of his bed, her face twisted with jealousy and rage. "You promised," she shrieked. "You swore you would never love another. How could you betray me so quickly?" The husband sat bolt upright, his heart hammering with terror and guilt. But the ghost's torment had only begun. Night after night, she appeared with increasingly detailed accusations. She knew exactly what gifts he had given his new fiancée, describing the silk scarf and its intricate pattern, recounting word for word the intimate conversations they had shared by the river, even revealing private moments of affection. "I know everything you do," the ghost would wail. "Every thought, every touch, every whispered word of love that should have been mine." The man began to lose weight and sleep. His fiancée noticed his haggard appearance and growing anxiety, but how could he explain that his dead wife was haunting their relationship? The situation became unbearable. Finally, a neighbor suggested he seek counsel from a wise Zen master who lived in a small temple outside the village. In desperation, the man made the journey and poured out his story to the old teacher. The master listened with patient attention, occasionally nodding with understanding. When the tale was finished, he stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Your former wife became a ghost and knows everything you do," the master observed calmly. "Whatever you say, whatever you give your beloved, she knows. She must be a very wise ghost indeed. Really, you should admire such supernatural knowledge." The man looked puzzled, unsure whether the master was mocking his suffering. "The next time she appears," continued the master, "bargain with her. Tell her that since she knows so much and you can hide nothing from her, if she will answer you one question truthfully, you promise to break your engagement and remain single for the rest of your life." "What question should I ask?" the man inquired eagerly. The master smiled with gentle mischief. "Take a large handful of soybeans and ask her exactly how many beans you hold in your hand. If she cannot tell you, you will know she is only a figment of your imagination and will trouble you no longer." That night, when the ghost appeared with her usual accusations and supernatural knowledge, the man was ready. He flattered her extensively, praising her omniscience and admitting he could hide nothing from her penetrating awareness. "Indeed," replied the ghost with satisfaction, "and I know you went to see that Zen master today. I heard every word he said to you." "And since you know so much," demanded the man, holding up a closed fist filled with beans, "tell me exactly how many beans I hold in this hand." Suddenly, there was only silence in the moonlit room. The ghost vanished completely and never appeared again. The Buddha taught, "The whole secret of existence is to have no fear. Never fear what will become of you. Depend on no one. Only the moment you reject all help are you freed." This story reveals how our own minds create the very phantoms that terrorize us. Why do we give such power to the ghosts of our past? Zen Buddhism points to several psychological mechanisms that keep us trapped by internal apparitions. First is guilt, the mind's tendency to punish ourselves for moving beyond old loyalties, even when that movement is natural and healthy. The ghost's supernatural knowledge wasn't actually supernatural at all. She knew about the gifts and conversations because the man's own guilty conscience was creating her omniscience. Every detail she recounted was information already present in his own mind, projected outward and given the appearance of external reality. This represents a profound teaching about the nature of psychological haunting. The demons that torment us, guilt, shame, fear, regret, often appear to have external reality and independent power. They seem to know our every weakness, to see through our every defense, to anticipate our every attempt at escape. But like the ghost in this story, they derive all their knowledge from our own consciousness. Consider the ghosts that might be haunting your own life. Perhaps it's the voice of a critical parent that continues to judge your choices long after they're gone. Maybe it's the specter of past failures that convinces you not to try again. Or it could be the phantom of old relationships that prevents you from opening your heart to new love. These psychological ghosts often seem to possess uncanny insight into our vulnerabilities. They know exactly which accusations will wound us most deeply, which fears will paralyze us most completely. But their apparent omniscience is simply our own self-knowledge turned against us by guilt and conditioning. The Zen master's test with the beans represents the power of discriminating wisdom to dissolve psychological illusions. By asking for information the ghost couldn't possibly possess, something outside the man's own knowledge, he revealed her true nature as a mental construction rather than an independent entity. This doesn't diminish the reality of the man's suffering. The ghost's psychological impact was absolutely real, affecting his sleep, his relationships, and his peace of mind. But understanding her true source gave him the power to dissolve her hold over his life. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This paradox applies to our relationship with psychological ghosts. We can acknowledge the reality of our guilt and conditioning, while also recognizing that these patterns aren't permanent features of our consciousness. The beans represent any question that takes us outside the closed loop of our conditioned thinking. When we're caught in cycles of self-torment, we can ask ourselves, what evidence exists outside my own guilty conscience that this self-punishment is necessary or helpful? Often, like the ghost, our internal critics fall silent when confronted with such inquiries. The master's gentle mischief in this story shows how wisdom sometimes appears as playfulness rather than solemn instruction. He didn't argue with the man's belief in the ghost or try to convince him through rational analysis. Instead, he provided a skillful test that allowed the truth to reveal itself. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." The man's liberation came not through continued loyalty to his dead wife's jealous demands, but through recognizing his right to love and be loved again. The ghost dissolved when he stopped feeding it with his own guilty energy. Tonight, as you become aware of any ghosts from your past that continue to haunt your present choices, can you find your own handful of beans? Can you ask these internal critics questions they cannot answer, revealing their true nature as constructions of your own conditioning rather than voices of ultimate truth? As the Zen master showed, sometimes the most profound liberation comes through the simplest test of what is real and what is merely the shadow of our own making. Now, among the sacred pilgrimage routes that wind through ancient landscapes, we encounter a teaching about the discovery of what was never truly lost. This is the story of the 10 pilgrims and the missing traveler. In ancient times, when pilgrimage routes wound through mountain passes and across rushing rivers, 10 monks embarked on an arduous journey to a distant holy city. They walked for days through challenging terrain, their hearts filled with devotion and their minds focused on the sacred destination that lay ahead. Each step was taken with intention, each mile covered with the hope that reaching the holy place would bring them closer to enlightenment. At one point in their journey, they came to a fierce river that roared with spring snowmelt, its waters rushing violently between jagged rocks that could easily crush anyone who lost their footing. The crossing would require careful attention and mutual support. One mistake could be fatal. One by one, the pilgrims helped each other navigate the treacherous waters. They formed a human chain, the strongest monks positioning themselves to catch anyone who might slip. Slowly, carefully, with hearts pounding and prayers on their lips, they made their way across the dangerous passage. When they finally reached the safety of the far shore, they collapsed on the rocky bank, grateful to be alive and relieved to have overcome such a perilous obstacle. Their robes were soaked, their sandals filled with river water, but they had survived what could have been a disaster. The leader of the group, feeling the weight of responsibility for his fellow pilgrims, decided to count everyone to ensure they had all crossed safely. This was a reasonable precaution. In the confusion and fear of the crossing, it would be easy to lose track of someone. "Line up, brothers," he called out, "so I can confirm we are all here." The monks arranged themselves in a row, and their leader began to count carefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He paused, counting again with growing alarm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Horror spread across his face as the terrible truth seemed to dawn. "Brothers!" he cried out in anguish. "Only 9 of us have made it across. One of our beloved companions has been lost to the river." The other monks gasped in shock and grief. Each one began to count for himself, hoping their leader had made an error. But one after another, each monk arrived at the same devastating conclusion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Only 9 pilgrims had survived the crossing. They began to weep and wail, calling out the names of their missing brother, wondering who among them had been swept away by the merciless current. Their joy at surviving the crossing transformed into bitter mourning for their lost companion. As they sat by the river in their grief, a wise stranger happened upon the scene. He observed the 10 monks, for indeed, there were 10 of them clearly visible to his eyes, weeping and lamenting as if someone had died. "Good brothers," he asked gently, "what has happened to cause such an outpouring of sorrow?" The leader looked up through his tears. "Kind stranger, we are pilgrims on a sacred journey. There were 10 of us when we began to cross this dangerous river, but now one of our beloved brothers has been lost in the waters. We cannot find him anywhere." The stranger looked around, counting the monks before him with a puzzled expression. By his count, there were clearly 10 pilgrims present. Understanding dawned on him, and he had to suppress a smile at the innocent mistake that was causing such unnecessary suffering. "Sir," he said kindly, "would you please count your group again, just to make certain?" "Yes, of course," replied the leader, who began counting aloud once more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. His voice broke on the final number. "Oh, alas, one is gone forever." "But, sir," said the stranger gently, "you have forgotten to count yourself." In that moment, profound silence fell over the group. The leader looked down at his own body as if seeing it for the first time. Understanding flooded through all 10 monks simultaneously. Their missing brother had never been lost. He had been right there all along, doing the counting. Joy erupted from the group as they realized the magnitude of their error. Their tears of grief transformed into laughter at their own beautiful foolishness. The 10th pilgrim was found without having to search anywhere at all. The Buddha taught, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." This story reveals the cosmic joke at the heart of all spiritual seeking. We search everywhere for what we never actually lost. Why do we consistently forget to count ourselves in the search for completeness? Zen Buddhism points to what might be called the looking outside habit, our deeply conditioned tendency to search for fulfillment, peace, and wholeness in external circumstances, achievements, or experiences. The 10 pilgrims represent our various attempts to find ourselves through spiritual practice, personal development, or life accomplishments. Like the monks crossing the dangerous river, we often endure great hardships and overcome significant obstacles in our quest for something we believe is missing from our lives. The act of counting others while forgetting ourselves perfectly captures how consciousness works when caught in seeking mode. We can see and account for everything in our experience: our thoughts, emotions, circumstances, relationships, achievements, while somehow overlooking the aware presence that is doing all the observing. Consider how this pattern manifests in daily life. We search for happiness in the next purchase, relationship, or accomplishment, forgetting that the capacity for happiness is the very awareness doing the searching. We seek peace through meditation techniques or lifestyle changes, overlooking the peaceful awareness that exists prior to any mental or physical state. The pilgrim's grief over their lost companion represents the genuine suffering we experience when we believe something essential is missing from our lives. This isn't mere intellectual confusion. It creates real emotional pain, just as the monk's tears were authentic, even though based on a misunderstanding. The wise stranger who helped them see their error represents the function of awakened wisdom, whether it comes through a teacher, a moment of insight, or sudden recognition. This wisdom doesn't add anything new to our experience, but simply points out what was always already present. Zen Master Bankai taught, "You are perfect as you are, but you could use a little improvement." This paradox captures the essence of the pilgrim's discovery. They were already complete, all 10 were present, but they needed to recognize this completeness rather than continuing to search for what seemed missing. The moment of recognition, when the leader realized he had forgotten to count himself, represents what Zen calls sudden awakening. Not because anything new is gained, but because the seeking that was obscuring our natural wholeness suddenly ceases. This doesn't mean we stop engaging in practices or pursuing growth. The pilgrims continued their journey to the holy city, even after discovering they weren't missing anyone. But their relationship to the journey changed from desperate seeking to joyful expression of what they had discovered they already possessed. The Buddha said, "Everything we need is inside us. We just need to access it." The stranger's simple observation created this access not by adding information, but by redirecting attention from outward searching to present awareness. In our modern context, we might be counting our accomplishments, relationships, possessions, or spiritual experiences, while forgetting to include the awareness that makes all counting possible. We catalog our progress in meditation, therapy, or personal development, while overlooking the unchanging presence that observes all progress. The most profound aspect of this teaching is its revelation that enlightenment isn't a state to be attained, but our natural condition to be recognized. Like the 10th pilgrim, we were never actually lost. We just forgot to include ourselves in our inventory of what's present. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, can you find the awareness that has been present through every moment of your seeking? Can you discover the one who has been looking for peace, happiness, or fulfillment all along? As the wise stranger showed, sometimes the most profound discoveries require nothing more than remembering to count ourselves among those who are already here, already whole, already home. Our next story reveals the transformative power of genuine repentance and the way authentic service can heal even the deepest wounds. This is the story of Zenkai and the tunnel through the mountain. In the bustling capital city of Edo, where samurai walked with purposeful strides and merchants called out their wares, lived a young man named Zenkai. Born into the warrior class, he had been raised with strict codes of honor and duty, but like many young men, he found himself drawn away from these teachings by the pull of passion and desire. Zenkai had become the retainer of a high government official, a position that brought him close to power and privilege. But proximity to his master's household also brought him into contact with the official's beautiful wife. What began as stolen glances across courtyards grew into secret meetings and whispered conversations. Despite his training in self-discipline, Zenkai found himself consumed by a love that violated every principle he had been taught. When their affair was eventually discovered, the confrontation was swift and terrible. The official's rage was absolute, and in the heat of the moment, fearing for his life, Zenkai drew his sword and killed his master. With blood on his hands and his honor shattered, he fled the capital with the woman, two fugitives bound together by shared guilt and desperation. For months they wandered, surviving as thieves and outcasts. But the woman's greed grew with each stolen coin, her demands becoming more excessive and dangerous. Zenkai watched with growing disgust as the person he had sacrificed everything for revealed her true nature. Finally, unable to bear the corruption they had both embraced, he left her and wandered alone into the remote province of Buzin. In that desolate place, far from the life he had known, Zenkai became a wandering mendicant. His samurai robes were replaced by rough hemp, his sword traded for a begging bowl. But more than his external circumstances had changed. The weight of his actions pressed down on him like a mountain. He had taken a life, destroyed a family, and abandoned every principle his upbringing had instilled. During his solitary wanderings, Zenkai discovered a treacherous mountain pass where a narrow road clung to sheer cliffs. Local villagers told him stories of travelers who had fallen to their deaths, of families separated when horses lost their footing on the crumbling path. The road had claimed dozens of lives over the years, yet it remained the only route connecting several isolated communities. Standing at the edge of that dangerous precipice, an extraordinary resolve crystallized in Zenkai's heart. He would cut a tunnel through the solid rock of the mountain, creating a safe passage for all future travelers. This would be his offering to the world, not to earn forgiveness, for he believed himself unforgivable, but simply because it was the right thing to do. With only primitive tools, Zenkai began the impossible task. Each day, he begged for food in nearby villages, and each night, he returned to chip away at the mountain by torchlight. Villagers thought him mad. One man attempting to bore through solid rock with hand tools seemed like the fantasy of a broken mind. But Zenkai persisted. Day after day, month after month, year after year, his hands became permanently scarred from the rough tools, his back bent from the constant labor. 30 years passed in this fashion. The tunnel grew slowly, 2,280 feet long, 20 feet high, 30 feet wide. Each foot of progress was earned through countless strikes of chisel against stone. 2 years before the work was completed, Zenkai's past finally caught up with him. The son of the official he had slain, now grown into a skilled swordsman, had spent years tracking his father's killer. When he finally found Zenkai, grey-haired and weathered from decades of labor, the young man's sword was already drawn. "I have come to claim my father's revenge," he announced, his voice steady with long-nursed anger. Zenkai set down his tools and faced his pursuer with calm acceptance. "I will give you my life willingly," he said without hesitation. "Only let me finish this work. On the day the tunnel is completed, then you may kill me." The young swordsman agreed to wait, expecting the work to be finished within days. But as weeks turned to months, and he watched Zenkai's relentless dedication to the task, something unexpected began to happen. Initially, the waiting became tedious, so he started helping with the digging simply to pass time. But as he worked alongside the man he had planned to kill, the swordsman began to see something he hadn't expected. Zenkai's commitment was absolute, not the obsession of a madman, but the focused determination of someone who had found authentic purpose. The killer he had imagined turned out to be a man who had spent 30 years of his life creating something that would serve countless people he would never meet. Month after month, the young man helped dig. He watched Zenkai's gentle interactions with villagers, saw how the older man refused any comfort for himself while working tirelessly for others. Gradually, admiration replaced hatred. The man he had come to kill had become his teacher in dedication, service, and the transformation of guilt into compassionate action. At last, the tunnel was completed. Villagers celebrated as the first travelers passed safely through the mountain. Children ran through the passage, their laughter echoing off the carved walls. Families could now visit each other without risking their lives on the treacherous cliff road. Standing at the tunnel's entrance, Zenkai turned to the young swordsman. "Now cut off my head," he said simply. "My work is done." But the young man's eyes filled with tears. "How can I cut off my own teacher's head?" he asked, his voice breaking with emotion. The Buddha taught, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." This story reveals how authentic repentance transforms not only the person seeking redemption, but also those whose lives they touch. Why do we often doubt that genuine transformation is possible? Zen Buddhism points to our tendency to define ourselves and others by past actions rather than present possibilities. Zenkai's story demonstrates that while we cannot undo past harm, we can dedicate our remaining time to creating benefit that far outweighs the damage we caused. The tunnel represents what Zen calls great vow, commitment that transcends personal comfort or convenience. Unlike acts of penance performed to earn forgiveness, Zenkai's work arose from authentic remorse, coupled with genuine desire to serve. He wasn't trying to balance karmic scales, but responding to suffering with the only gift he could offer: 30 years of his life in service to others' safety. Consider how transformation works in your own experience. Perhaps you've carried guilt over harsh words spoken in anger, or choices that caused pain to people you loved. The conventional approach might involve apologies, promises to change, or attempts to make direct amends. While these have their place, Zenkai's story points to something deeper: the possibility of allowing our mistakes to break our hearts open, rather than simply burden us with shame. The young swordsman's transformation illustrates how authentic service can heal even the wounds of those we've harmed. He came seeking justice through violence, but discovered something more valuable: a teacher who showed him what dedicated service looks like. The man who killed his father ultimately gave him a model for living that no amount of revenge could have provided. This doesn't romanticize the original crime or suggest that Zenkai's service erased his responsibility. Rather, it shows how acknowledging the full weight of our actions can fuel commitment to creating benefit rather than just minimizing harm. The tunnel saved countless lives that the original killing had put at risk. But this wasn't calculated restitution. It was love expressing itself through whatever means were available. Zen Master Dogen taught, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things." Zenkai's 30-year labor was a forgetting of self, not through denial of responsibility, but through complete dedication to something larger than his personal redemption. The physical demands of the tunnel work, the scarred hands, bent back, and decades of isolation mirror the internal process of working through deep remorse. Transformation often requires this kind of sustained effort over years rather than sudden breakthrough. Each strike of Zenkai's chisel against rock was both practical progress and spiritual practice. The story's climax reveals the ultimate teaching. Authentic service transforms the servant as much as it benefits others. The man who began digging as a criminal seeking to atone had become someone worthy of respect and love, not because his past was erased, but because he had allowed that past to fuel 30 years of selfless action. The Buddha said, "Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathering it little by little, fills oneself with good." Zenkai's tunnel was built one strike at a time, just as his character was rebuilt one day of service at a time. Neither happened quickly, but both created something that would benefit countless people for generations. Tonight, as you reflect on areas where you might carry guilt or regret, can you sense the possibility of transformation through service? Can you imagine how your own mistakes might become the fuel for creating something beneficial rather than just the source of ongoing self-punishment? As Zenkai discovered, sometimes the heaviest burdens can become the foundation for the most meaningful contributions. Now, let us explore a story about the difference between surface judgments and deeper motivations, and how wisdom often appears in forms that conventional thinking cannot recognize. This is the story of Geshen, the monk who was called the stingy artist. In a mountain monastery where morning mist clung to ancient pine trees, lived Geshen, a monk whose artistic talent was renowned throughout the region. His brush could capture the essence of a bird in flight with just a few elegant strokes, and his paintings of mountain landscapes seemed to breathe with spiritual presence. Yet despite living in a religious community dedicated to non-attachment, Geshen had earned an unusual reputation that puzzled and sometimes scandalized those who knew him. Before beginning any artwork, Geshen always insisted on being paid in advance, and his fees were remarkably high. Unlike other monk artists, who might paint for the joy of creation or as offerings to the temple, Geshen approached his art like a merchant, calculating costs and demanding premium prices. This behavior earned him the nickname, the stingy artist, and many people whispered that his monastic vows had been corrupted by greed. One evening, a beautiful geisha from the nearby pleasure district approached Geshen with a commission. She moved with the refined grace of someone trained in the arts of entertainment, her silk kimono rustling softly as she bowed before the monk artist. "Master Geshen," she said respectfully, "I would like you to create a painting for me." Without hesitation, Geshen asked the question that had become his trademark. "How much can you pay?" The geisha smiled mysteriously. "Whatever you charge, but I have one unusual request. I want you to do the work in front of me while I am entertaining my patron." Geshen agreed, and several days later, he was summoned to the geisha's house. She was hosting an elaborate feast for a wealthy merchant who regularly sought her company. The room was filled with the finest delicacies, expensive sake, and the soft glow of paper lanterns. Musicians played in the background, while the geisha entertained her guest with witty conversation and graceful dance. In this atmosphere of luxury and sensual pleasure, Gesson calmly set up his materials and began to paint. His brush moved with confident precision, creating an image of exquisite beauty, while the feast continued around him. He appeared completely focused on his work, unmoved by the extravagant surroundings or the intimate atmosphere between the geisha and her patron. When the painting was completed, Gesson named his price, the highest sum he had ever charged. The geisha paid without protest, but as she handed him the money, she turned to her patron with a knowing look. "Look at this artist," she said, her voice carrying a note of theatrical disdain. "All he wants is money. His paintings are technically excellent, but his mind is dirty. Money has caused it to become muddy. Work drawn by such a filthy mind is not fit to be displayed anywhere respectable. It's just about good enough for one of my petticoats." With deliberate theatricality, she removed her silk undergarment and handed it to Gesson. "Paint another picture on the back of this," she commanded, "since your work is only suited for underclothing anyway." The patron laughed at what he perceived as a clever insult to the money-obsessed monk. He expected Gesson to be embarrassed or offended by such treatment, but Gesson simply looked at the silk garment and asked, without any change in expression, "How much will you pay?" "Oh, any amount," the geisha replied, curious to see how far she could push this apparently greedy monk. Gesson named an even more outrageous price, which the geisha paid. He then painted on her petticoat with the same careful attention he had given to the formal commission, completed his work, collected his payment, and departed without showing any sign of embarrassment or anger. Years later, after Gesson had disappeared from the region, the truth about his apparent greed was finally revealed. Throughout his career as the stingy artist, he had been secretly pursuing 3 compassionate goals that required substantial funding. First, his province was regularly devastated by famines that left poor families starving while wealthy landowners hoarded grain. Gesson had quietly established a secret warehouse that he kept filled with rice and other essentials, ready to distribute during emergencies. His greed had been feeding the hungry for decades. Second, the road from his village to the national shrine was in terrible condition, causing injury and hardship to countless pilgrims. Gesson had been saving money to build a proper road that would serve travelers for generations. Third, his beloved teacher had died before fulfilling his dream of building a temple. Gesson had resolved to honor his teacher's memory by completing this sacred project. After accomplishing these 3 wishes through his art sales, Gesson threw away his brushes and materials, retired to the mountains, and never painted again. The stingy artist had been revealed as one of the most generous men in the province. The Buddha taught, "Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many." This story reveals how easily we misjudge others when we base our assessments on surface appearances rather than deeper understanding. Why do we so readily judge others by their external behavior? Zen Buddhism points to what might be called surface mind, our tendency to create complete narratives about people based on limited observations. The geisha, her patron, and the community all saw Gesson's insistence on payment and concluded his mind was corrupted by greed, never investigating deeper motivations. The geisha's theatrical humiliation of Gesson represents how society often punishes those who violate conventional expectations, even when that violation serves a higher purpose. She and her patron felt justified in their mockery because Gessen's behavior seemed to contradict proper monastic conduct. But Gessen's calm acceptance of even the most insulting treatment reveals someone operating from a completely different framework. He wasn't attached to social approval or concerned with maintaining his reputation. His only concern was raising funds for his 3 projects, and if that meant painting on undergarments while being ridiculed, he was willing to accept such conditions. Consider how often we make similar misjudgments in daily life. Perhaps we criticize a colleague for working long hours, assuming they're ambitious and selfish, without knowing they're supporting elderly parents. Maybe we judge someone for driving an expensive car, not realizing they use it for volunteer work that requires reliable transportation. Our quick assessments often miss the fuller picture of others' circumstances and motivations. The story also reveals the difference between conventional morality and deeper wisdom. Conventional thinking says monks should be detached from money, should give their services freely, should maintain dignified behavior in all circumstances. But Gessen's apparent violations of these norms were actually expressions of profound compassion, operating on a longer timeline than most people could perceive. Zen teacher Linji said, "There is nothing special to do. Just be ordinary. Relieve yourself, wash your face, put on your clothes and eat your food. When tired, sleep." Gessen embodied this teaching by approaching his fundraising with the same calm practicality he brought to painting. There was no drama, no explanation, no defense, just systematic work toward compassionate goals. The 3 projects Gessen funded represent different aspects of service: immediate relief for suffering, feeding the hungry, infrastructure that serves many people over time, building the road, and honoring spiritual lineage, completing his teacher's temple. His approach integrated practical compassion with spiritual devotion in a way that transcended conventional categories. The revelation of Gessen's true motivations doesn't make him a hero so much as it reveals the limitations of judging anyone based on partial information. How many people in our own lives might be carrying out similar hidden acts of service while appearing to violate social expectations? Gessen's retirement after completing his 3 goals shows the difference between attachment to artistic identity and using artistic skill as a tool for service. Once his paintings had served their purpose of generating funds for compassion, he had no need to continue creating them. His identity was never tied to being an artist. It was tied to being of service. The Buddha said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared." Gessen's secret warehouse, road project, and temple were all ways of lighting candles that would continue benefiting people long after he was gone. Tonight, as you consider the judgments you might hold about others' behavior, can you sense the possibility that motivations might be more complex than they appear? Can you hold space for the mystery of what drives people's choices, rather than rushing to condemn what doesn't immediately make sense? As Gessen showed, sometimes the most generous hearts hide behind the most puzzling behaviors. Now, from the halls of scholarly debate, where words carry weight and misunderstanding breeds comedy, comes a story about the nature of communication itself. This is the story of the one-eyed monk and the traveling debater. In a remote temple, nestled among snow-capped mountains in northern Japan, 2 brother monks had made their home together. The temple followed an ancient tradition. Any wandering monk could request shelter, but only if he could win a theological debate with the resident monks. This practice ensured that only those with deep understanding of Buddhist teachings would be granted lodging, while also providing intellectual stimulation for the isolated community. The elder brother was renowned for his scholarship, having spent decades studying the most complex philosophical texts. His mind was sharp as a sword, capable of dissecting the finest points of doctrine and engaging in debates that could last from sunset to sunrise. The younger brother, however, was considered simple-minded by most standards. He had lost one eye in an accident years earlier, and his understanding of Buddhist philosophy seemed as limited as his physical vision. One snowy evening, a traveling monk arrived seeking shelter. Following proper protocol, he formally requested the traditional debate about Buddhist teachings. The elder brother, exhausted from a long day of intensive study, felt too tired to engage in the rigorous intellectual combat that such debates required. "Brother," he said to the younger monk, "please take my place tonight. But remember, conduct the dialogue in silence. Let wisdom speak through gesture rather than words." The younger monk, though nervous about representing the temple's reputation, agreed to fulfill this responsibility. The two monks, the confident traveler and the anxious resident, made their way to the shrine room and sat facing each other in the flickering candlelight. What followed was a brief, wordless exchange that would be interpreted very differently by each participant. The traveling monk, eager to demonstrate his understanding, began by holding up one finger with ceremonial gravity. The younger monk, after a moment's consideration, held up 2 fingers in response. The visitor then raised 3 fingers, maintaining the solemn dignity appropriate to theological discourse. At this point, the younger monk's face flushed with anger, and he shook his clenched fist directly in front of the stranger's face. Startled by this aggressive gesture, the traveling monk immediately rose and hurried to find the elder brother. "Your young brother is a remarkable fellow," he announced with genuine admiration. "He defeated me completely. I have no choice but to continue my journey tonight, despite the snow." The elder brother, surprised that his simple younger brother had succeeded where he might have struggled, asked for details of the exchange. "The debate was profound," the traveler explained enthusiastically. "First, I held up one finger to represent Buddha, the enlightened one. Your brother immediately responded by holding up 2 fingers, signifying Buddha and his teaching, showing that enlightenment cannot be separated from the Dharma that expresses it." He continued with growing excitement. "I then held up 3 fingers, representing Buddha, his teaching, and the Sangha, the community of followers living in harmony with these principles. But your brother's response was magnificent. He shook his clenched fist at me, indicating that all 3, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, arise from one unified realization. His understanding is so deep that he demolished my argument completely. I am honored to have encountered such wisdom." With these words, the traveling monk gathered his belongings and departed into the snowy night, convinced he had met a master of silent Buddhist discourse. Meanwhile, the younger monk came running into the main hall, his face still red with indignation. "Where is that fellow?" he demanded angrily. "I'm going to give him the beating he deserves." The elder brother, puzzled by this reaction, said gently, "I understand you won the debate. The traveling monk left speaking of your profound wisdom." "Won nothing!" the younger monk exploded. "I'm going to beat him up if I can catch him." "Please, tell me what happened during your dialogue," the elder brother requested, trying to understand the source of his brother's fury. "The arrogant fool insulted me the moment he saw me," the younger monk exclaimed. He held up one finger, making fun of the fact that I have only one eye. Since he was a stranger and a guest, I thought I should be polite, so I held up two fingers, congratulating him on having two good eyes. His voice grew more agitated as he continued. But then the rude wretch held up three fingers, suggesting that between the two of us, we only have three eyes total. That was too much. I got ready to punch him for such impolite behavior, but the coward ran away before I could teach him proper manners. The Buddha taught, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." This story reveals how completely our internal perspectives shape our interpretation of external events. Why do two people witness the same events, yet create entirely different meanings? Zen Buddhism points to what might be called projection mind, our tendency to interpret others' actions through the lens of our own concerns, fears, and preoccupations. The traveling monk saw philosophical discourse, where the younger monk saw personal insults, yet both were responding to identical gestures. The traveling monk's interpretation was shaped by his scholarly training and expectation of theological debate. Every gesture became laden with doctrinal significance because that's the framework he brought to the encounter. His mind was primed to see wisdom and enlightenment, so that's exactly what he discovered in the younger monk's responses. The younger monk's interpretation was shaped by his self-consciousness about his physical disability and his assumption that others would notice and comment on his missing eye. His mind was primed to detect mockery and insult, so that's precisely what he found in the stranger's gestures. Consider how this dynamic operates in your own daily interactions. Perhaps a colleague doesn't return your greeting, and you interpret this as rudeness or dismissal, not knowing they're preoccupied with a family crisis. Maybe someone cancels plans at the last minute, and you assume they don't value your friendship, unaware they're dealing with sudden work pressures. The elder brother's role in this story represents the possibility of stepping back from our immediate interpretations to examine how perspective shapes perception. His gentle questioning revealed the complete disconnect between the two participants' experiences of the same event. The humor in this story isn't just comedic relief. It points to something profound about the nature of communication itself. Even when people share the same language, culture, and basic context, their internal worlds can be so different that meaningful exchange becomes nearly impossible without great care and awareness. Zen teacher Huangpo said, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." Both monks in this debate were rejecting what they actually saw, simple gestures, in favor of what they thought, complex interpretations based on their own mental frameworks. The story also reveals how our expectations create self-fulfilling prophecies. The traveling monk expected to encounter wisdom and therefore experienced the exchange as profound teaching. The younger monk expected to be mocked and therefore experienced the same gestures as deliberate insults. Neither was entirely wrong within their own interpretive framework. This doesn't lead to complete relativism. Some interpretations are more accurate than others, but it does point to the importance of questioning our immediate assumptions about others' motivations and meanings. The silent dialogue could have been resolved with a simple spoken question. "What do you mean by holding up that finger?" The Buddha said, "Believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, no matter if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense." This teaching applies not just to spiritual doctrines, but to our moment-to-moment interpretations of other people's behavior. The younger monk's physical disability became a lens through which he interpreted everything, just as the traveling monk's scholarly training became his interpretive lens. We all carry such lenses, our past experiences, current concerns, and unconscious assumptions that color our perception of reality. The traveling monk's departure into the snowy night, convinced he had encountered profound wisdom, while the younger monk remained behind, convinced he had been insulted, perfectly captures the human comedy of misunderstanding. Both went away with their worldviews confirmed, neither having actually communicated with the other. Tonight, as you reflect on recent interactions that might have left you confused, hurt, or frustrated, can you sense the possibility that different interpretations might be equally valid? Can you hold space for the mystery of what others actually mean, rather than assuming your first interpretation is correct? As this story shows, sometimes the most profound misunderstandings arise not from malice, but from the simple fact that we each live in our own private world of meaning, rarely checking whether others share our interpretations of what seems obvious to us. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us explore a story about the transformative power of unconditional kindness and how genuine care dissolves shame more effectively than punishment ever could. This is the story of the Midnight Wanderer and his master's unexpected response. In a mountain temple where the sound of evening bells marked the rhythm of disciplined spiritual life, Master Sengai taught meditation to a devoted group of students. The monastery followed ancient routines: early morning sitting, communal meals eaten in silence, work practice in the gardens, and evening Dharma talks before retiring to simple sleeping quarters. Most students found deep satisfaction in this structured existence, but human nature being what it is, not everyone was equally committed to the monastic schedule. Among Sengai's pupils was a young man who struggled with the temple's strict boundaries. During the day, he participated fully in all activities, sitting zazen with apparent dedication and performing his assigned duties without complaint. But as night fell and the temple settled into peaceful silence, restlessness would arise in his heart like a tide he couldn't resist. The young monk had discovered that by using a high wooden stool, he could climb over the temple wall and escape into the nearby town. There, in the pleasure quarters filled with bright lanterns and lively music, he could forget the weight of spiritual discipline and lose himself in worldly entertainment. He told himself these midnight excursions were harmless, just brief respites from the intensity of monastic life. Night after night, the pattern repeated. After the evening meditation ended and his fellow students retired to their quarters, he would wait until the temple was completely quiet, then carefully position the stool against the wall, climb over, and slip away into the darkness. He always returned before dawn prayers, replacing the stool and settling into his sleeping mat as if he had never left. Master Sengai, however, possessed the keen awareness that comes from decades of observing human behavior. During one of his regular evening inspections of the dormitory, he noticed the young monk's absence and quickly discovered the telltale stool positioned against the temple wall. Understanding immediately what was happening, Sengai quietly removed the stool and took its place, standing motionlessly in the shadows. Hours later, the wayward student returned from his night of pleasure, his mind still buzzing with wine and entertainment, but beginning to feel the familiar weight of guilt and anxiety about his secret behavior. In the darkness, he couldn't see that anything had changed. Assuming the stool was exactly where he had left it, he reached up to climb back over the wall. Without hesitation, he placed his feet on what he thought was the wooden stool and jumped down into the temple grounds. Only when he landed did he realize with horror that he had stepped on his master's head and shoulders. Sengai had served as a human stepping stool, absorbing the impact of his student's descent with patient silence. The young monk stood frozen in shock and shame, expecting the fierce rebuke he knew he deserved. He had been caught red-handed in his deception, had literally trampled on his teacher's dignity, and had violated the trust placed in him as a student of the Dharma. But Sengai's response was unlike anything the young man could have anticipated. Rising slowly and brushing the dust from his robes, the master looked at his student with eyes full of gentle concern. "It is very chilly in the early morning," Sengai said softly. "Do be careful not to catch cold yourself." With these words, he walked quietly back toward his quarters, leaving the young monk standing alone in the moonlit courtyard, tears streaming down his face. From that night forward, the student never again climbed over the temple wall. His midnight wanderings ended not because he had been punished or threatened, but because he had encountered a love so complete and unconditional that it dissolved his need to escape. The Buddha taught, "Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal." Sengai's response demonstrates how compassion can accomplish what punishment never could: genuine transformation from within. Why do we often believe that wrongdoing must be met with consequences to prevent its repetition? Zen Buddhism points to our deep conditioning around justice and retribution, the belief that people only change behavior when faced with unpleasant results. But this story reveals a different possibility, that shame dissolves naturally in the presence of unconditional acceptance. The young monk's midnight excursions represented what we might call spiritual claustrophobia, the feeling of being trapped by ideals we aspire to but haven't yet fully embodied. Rather than acknowledging this struggle openly, he created a secret life that allowed him to release pressure while maintaining his public image as a dedicated student. Consider how often we create similar double lives in our own experience. Perhaps we present ourselves as patient parents while secretly feeling overwhelmed and resentful. Maybe we maintain an image of confidence at work while privately struggling with imposter syndrome. These split existences arise when we believe our authentic struggles are unacceptable to those we respect. Sengai's decision to become the stool rather than catch the student in the act reveals profound wisdom about human psychology. By allowing himself to be literally stepped upon, he demonstrated that his student's welfare mattered more than his own dignity or authority. This wasn't passive martyrdom, but active compassion, using his own body to provide the support his student needed. The master's gentle words about catching cold show how true teachers focus on care rather than correction. Instead of addressing the rule-breaking, the deception, or the disrespect, Sengai expressed concern for his students' physical well-being. This response cut through all the young monk's defensive strategies and reached directly into his heart. The immediate and permanent transformation that followed illustrates how shame heals in the presence of unconditional love. The student's midnight escapes weren't really about pleasure. They were about feeling trapped and judged. When he encountered acceptance instead of judgment, the need to escape simply evaporated. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. Sengai maintained beginner's mind about his students' behavior, staying open to responding with love rather than defaulting to conventional discipline. This doesn't mean that boundaries and consequences are never appropriate. Rather, it suggests that our first response to others' mistakes might be curiosity about their underlying needs rather than immediate correction of their surface behavior. The young monk's actions were symptomatic of something deeper, a struggle with the intensity of spiritual practice that many students experience but few dare to discuss. Modern psychology confirms what Sengai understood intuitively. Shame rarely motivates lasting positive change. When people feel fundamentally accepted despite their mistakes, they become capable of honest self-reflection and genuine transformation. When they feel judged or rejected, they typically become more defensive and secretive. The master's willingness to literally support his students' transgression, serving as the stool that enabled the rule-breaking, demonstrates how unconditional love sometimes means helping people through their mistakes rather than preventing them. Sengai understood that his student needed to complete this particular journey of rebellion in order to discover its ultimate emptiness. The image of the respected teacher standing silently in place of a wooden stool captures something essential about genuine spiritual authority. Real power lies not in controlling others' behavior, but in remaining so centered in love that external circumstances cannot disturb our fundamental commitment to others' well-being. The Buddha said, "Teach this triple truth to all. A generous heart, kind speech, and a life of service and compassion are the things which renew humanity." Sengai's response embodied all three. His generous heart that absorbed the physical impact, his kind speech that expressed care rather than criticism, and his life of service that put his students' needs above his own comfort. The young monk's tears and immediate transformation weren't results of guilt or fear, but of recognition. He had encountered the very love he had been seeking in the pleasure quarters. His midnight excursions had been unconscious attempts to find acceptance and understanding, which he discovered were available right where he was, in the heart of his teacher's unlimited compassion. Tonight, as you reflect on areas where you might judge yourself or others harshly for human imperfections, can you sense the possibility of Sengai's response? Can you imagine meeting mistakes with curiosity rather than criticism, offering support rather than correction? As this story shows, sometimes the most profound teaching happens not through words or rules, but through the simple presence of unconditional love that melts resistance and opens hearts to genuine transformation. Our 11th story, the letter that points beyond death. Across the bridge between life and death, where fear meets wisdom and mortality reveals immortality, unfolds our next teaching about our essential nature. This is the story of Master Basui's letter to a dying disciple. In a small temple nestled among cherry trees that had witnessed countless seasons of blooming and falling, Master Basui had guided many students through the complexities of Zen practice. His teaching was known for its directness, cutting through conceptual elaborations to point students toward immediate recognition of their essential nature. Among his many devoted disciples was one who had practiced with particular sincerity for many years, attending every teaching, sitting through countless meditation sessions, and gradually deepening his understanding of the Dharma. But now this faithful student lay dying, his body ravaged by illness that no medicine could cure. As his condition worsened, word reached Master Basui that his disciple was struggling not just with physical pain, but with the fundamental terror that haunts all human beings when facing the dissolution of everything they have known as themselves. Understanding that this was perhaps the most crucial teaching moment in his student's life, Basui took brush and paper to compose what would become one of the most profound letters in Zen literature. He wrote with the care of someone addressing the deepest possible human need, the need to understand what remains when everything we think we are falls away. "My dear friend," the letter began, "I know you are facing the great transition, and I write to remind you of what you have always known, but perhaps forgotten in your current distress." Basui continued with words that cut through the fever dreams and physical suffering to the bedrock of reality. "The essence of your mind is not born, so it will never die. It is not an existence, which is perishable. It is not an emptiness, which is a mere void. It has neither color nor form. It enjoys no pleasures and suffers no pains." The master knew his student's mind would be clouded with pain and fear, so he chose his words carefully, each sentence designed to redirect attention away from the body's distress toward the unchanging awareness that observes all experiences. "I know you are very ill," he acknowledged, not dismissing the reality of his student's suffering, but placing it in a larger context. "Like a good Zen student, you are facing that sickness squarely. You may not know exactly who is suffering, but question yourself. What is the essence of this mind? Think only of this. You will need no more." Basui understood that in the face of death, the mind desperately grasps for anything that might provide security or continuation. Knowing this tendency, he advised his dying disciple, "Covet nothing. Your end, which is endless, is as a snowflake dissolving in the pure air." This final image, a snowflake returning to the vast sky from which it emerged, pointed to the ultimate teaching that death is not annihilation, but recognition. Just as a snowflake doesn't cease to exist when it melts, but returns to its original nature, as water, consciousness doesn't disappear at death, but reveals its essential nature as boundless awareness. When the letter reached the dying monk, those attending him noticed an immediate change. The anxiety that had gripped him for weeks began to dissolve. His breathing, which had been labored and fearful, became peaceful. In his final days, instead of fighting against his condition, he turned his attention to the essential question his teacher had posed. What is the essence of this mind? In his last conscious moments, witnesses reported that his face radiated a peace so profound it seemed to transform the very atmosphere of the room. He died, as Basui had suggested, like a snowflake, dissolving into pure air, with no resistance, no fear, only recognition of what had always been true. The Buddha taught, of all meditations, that on death is supreme. Basui's letter demonstrates how facing our mortality can become the gateway to understanding our immortal nature. Why do we fear death so intensely, and how can this fear be transformed into wisdom? Zen Buddhism points to our fundamental misidentification with the body and personality as our true self. When we believe we are only this collection of thoughts, memories, and physical sensations, death appears as total annihilation. But when we recognize our essential nature as pure awareness, death becomes simply another experience arising within our unchanging essence. The letter's opening teaching, "The essence of your mind is not born, so it will never die," points to what Zen calls original face or Buddha nature. This isn't a philosophical concept, but a direct recognition available in every moment. The awareness reading these words right now wasn't born when your body emerged from the womb and won't die when your body returns to the earth. Consider what changes and what remains constant in your own experience. Your body has completely replaced every cell multiple times since childhood, yet something maintains continuity. Your thoughts and emotions flow like weather patterns, yet something observes all these changes without being altered by them. Your memories fade and shift, yet something remains present through all transformations. Basui's instruction to question yourself, what is the essence of this mind, wasn't meant as intellectual analysis, but as direct investigation. In the face of death, when all conceptual supports fall away, this becomes the only relevant inquiry, not how can I survive or what will happen to me, but what am I essentially? The teaching that this essence enjoys no pleasures and suffers no pains doesn't deny the reality of human experience, but points to its temporary nature. Pain and pleasure arise within awareness like waves on the ocean's surface, but they don't fundamentally disturb the ocean's depths. Similarly, even intense physical or emotional experiences don't touch our essential nature. Modern hospice workers often observe that people who can relax their resistance to dying frequently experience profound peace in their final moments. This isn't resignation, but recognition. The discovery that what they feared losing was never who they truly were. The personality dissolves, but something essential remains untouched. The image of the snowflake dissolving in pure air captures this mystery perfectly. A snowflake appears to be a separate, individual thing, but it's actually a temporary formation of the very air and moisture that surround it. When conditions change, it doesn't go somewhere else. It returns to its original nature. Death may be similar, not a journey to somewhere else, but a recognition of what we've always been. Basui's advice to covet nothing addresses the desperate grasping that often intensifies as death approaches. The dying mind may cling to relationships, accomplishments, or even spiritual experiences, trying to take something solid across the threshold. But all forms of grasping create suffering because they're based on the false assumption that we're separate from what we're trying to hold on to. The letter's profound compassion lies not in offering false comfort or elaborate explanations about afterlife, but in pointing directly to what can be verified in immediate experience. Even in the midst of illness and fear, the awareness that recognizes these states remains untouched by them. Zen teacher Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things." The dying process can become the ultimate opportunity for this forgetting, letting go of all identification with the limited self to discover our essential nature as boundless awareness. The Buddha said, "Everything is changeable. Everything appears and disappears. There is no blissful peace until one passes beyond the agony of life and death." Basui's letter showed his students how to find this peace, not by escaping life and death, but by recognizing what remains unchanged through both. Tonight, as you rest in the awareness that witnesses all your experiences, thoughts, sensations, dreams, can you sense something of what Basui pointed to? Can you recognize the deathless essence that observes even the fear of death? As his letter revealed, our deepest peace comes not from guarantees about survival, but from discovering what we essentially are, the very awareness in which all experiences, including birth and death, arise and dissolve like snowflakes in the infinite sky of consciousness. Now let us explore a Zen story about priorities. This is the story of Tetsugen and his invisible sutras. In the mountains of Japan, where mist clung to ancient temples and the sound of woodpeckers echoed through silent forests, lived a monk named Tetsugen, whose heart burned with a singular mission. During his era, the precious teachings of the Buddha, the sutras that contained centuries of accumulated wisdom, were available only in Chinese characters that most Japanese people could not read. Tetsugen envisioned a great project, translating and printing these sacred texts in an edition that would make Buddha's teachings accessible to his people for generations to come. This was an almost impossibly ambitious undertaking. 7,000 copies were to be printed using wooden blocks, each one hand-carved with meticulous precision. The cost would be enormous, requiring donations from across the country. But Tetsugen's dedication to preserving and sharing the Dharma gave him the determination to begin this monumental task. He set out on foot, traveling from village to village, temple to temple, carrying nothing but his monk's bowl and an unwavering faith in his mission. In wealthy districts, sympathetic benefactors might donate 100 pieces of gold, understanding the value of making Buddhist teachings widely available. But most of his support came from poor farmers and merchants who could spare only a few small coins from their meager earnings. Tetsugen received each donation, whether gold or copper, large or tiny, with identical gratitude. He bowed just as deeply to the wealthy patron